Welcome to Writers That Cook. This is Lorian, and in today's episode we're making one of the most popular dishes in our family, double the beef stew, with red wine, for the pressure cooker. This is a great meal if you have just a little time, a frozen cut of beef, cheap wine, and a few ingredients. So let's get started. Heat up a carbon steel pan or a cast iron pan on high heat and put in approximately 4 grams of high temperature oil. We're using peanut oil here, but you can use canola or avocado. As the oil starts to smoke, put in 1,000 grams of beef. We are using tri-tip today, trimmed and cubed in bite-sized pieces. Add salt and pepper to taste. Let the beef sit a moment and sear on at least 2 sides. You may be asking why we do this if we're just going to be putting it in the pressure cooker. The answer is this is how you get deep, rich flavor. You can skip this step, but you'll likely need to add beef bouillon later to help on flavor if you do. As I said, we are using tri-tip today, taken from the freezer, defrosted, trimmed. We adore this particular cut of beef for its flavor, lean qualities, and versatility. Why double the beef? Well, we like our beef stew to taste like beef. Most beef stew recipes rely heavily on stretching a small amount of meat with potatoes, lots of veg, and salty bouillon. But in this recipe, the beef is the star, and that's what you taste. This tri-tip was purchased at a local restaurant supply store, one that opened to the public during COVID when most area restaurants were shuttered. So it's about half the cost of what a large chain grocery store or membership store would charge. We buy in bulk, trim the cuts, portion them out, and freeze in Ziploc bags wrapped in foil. Let's talk a little bit about the fresh herbs we are adding to this stew. This is fresh French thyme. I grow it in the garden, but you can get it at almost any grocery store. You can use dried, but I prefer the fresh. It has a little bit more of a subtle, less dusty flavor. You just take out the stems if you're using fresh and use the leaves. I didn't even have to chop it. This is fresh rosemary. And I did actually chop this quite heavily. Rosemary is a robust herb and it can stand some chopping. You want to use less of it than you think. This is flat leaf Italian parsley, and I did chop this, but I didn't double chop it. A rough chop is all you need. You don't want to bruise your herbs. These are dried bay leaves, and I'm using 3 of them today. If I had fresh bay leaves, I would probably just use 1. Now, when the beef is seared to your preference, we are going to add in approximately 4 grams of all-purpose flour, and we're going to stir to coat it. And the reason that we do this is it will help thicken the stew. And if you're a gluten-free house, I have used garbanzo flour or chickpea flour here instead of grain flour. Now you can go on to sear this a bit. I don't do that here. I don't want to use additional oils. This is really just to thicken the stew. We're going to season this with some black pepper. This is totally up to you how much you use. I like a lot of pepper, so don't freak out if you see me grinding it throughout this video. We're also going to grate over some kosher salt. Again, I just use a simple grater. The amount is up to you. Low sodium households may want to use none at all. You can also use garlic salt here. Once you've seasoned to your liking and you've stirred in the flour just enough to soak up the juices, we're going to add 119 grams of chopped red onion, just about half an onion, and we're going to stir that in. Now the reason we add fresh herbs and the onion during this stage and not in the instant pot is we just want them to kind of get to know each other a little bit in this sauteed heat. We also want to have those fresh herbs there when we deglaze. We're going to deglaze with mushroom broth. But right now we're going to add the fresh herbs. So in the herbs go the thyme, the rosemary. We are using 3 grams of chopped fresh thyme, 6 grams of chopped fresh rosemary, and 21 grams of chopped fresh flat leaf parsley. We are also using 60 grams of sliced white button mushrooms. You can use any kind of mushrooms you want. I've used portobello, I've used mini bellas. These are just lovely little sliced mushrooms that I got on sale at a local grocery store for about $3. We're just going to stir these to incorporate before we add in the last of our herbs. And yes, garlic is an herb. We're just going to stir this. You can see there's even more of the fond forming on the bottom. That's excellent. That's what you want. That's what's going to really give you that deep beef flavor. This is approximately 2 Garlic cloves, 2 whole garlic cloves. I did kind of a finer chop than a rough chop. They will almost disappear completely as you cook. And to this mixture, we're going to deglaze it, if you will, with 500 grams of low sodium mushroom broth. You can use low sodium beef broth, vegetable broth, or even water and beef bouillon, but remember to adjust the amount of salt that you've added throughout accordingly. At this stage, I turn off the burner. What I'm doing now is stirring with a wooden spatula to scrape up as much of the fond or the clustered bits of beef goodness from the bottom of the pan. This is where so much of the beef flavor of the stew comes from. You'll see the sauce start to thicken as you stir from the added flour. We are going to be stirring until we're sure the fond is all off the bottom before we transfer to our pressure cooker. This should only take 1 or 2 minutes. And today's pressure cooker, we are using an instant pot, one that has seen a fair bit of use. Our family probably uses the Instant Pot 2 to 3 times a week. So transfer the entire contents of the pan into the inside of a clean Instant Pot. Make sure you don't leave any of the fond behind. Use the spatula to scrape it off, get everything in there. You want all those bits of flavor that you've worked hard for, and it'll be easier to clean your pan as well. Now to this, we are going to be adding approximately half a bottle of cheap red wine. You can use beef bouillon, you can use water instead. It sounds like a lot, but bear in mind that every bottle of wine only has 4 or 5 glasses in it, so you're essentially adding 2.5 glasses of wine. This will cook down beautifully in the pressure cooker over the amount of time. The alcohol will boil away, and you'll be left with this wonderful flavor that's just deep and complements the beef so well. This is a cheap cabernet sauvignon that I got for less than $5 at a local grocery store. To this, we're adding the dried bay leaves. I'm using 3. I really like the taste of bay. You could use 1 or 2. Experiment until you've hit your personal preference. We are also adding some cracked black pepper. I've tasted the liquid and I found it needed just a bit more. Place the lid on the pressure cooker as per the manufacturer's direction. I'm using a 40 minutes on high pressure for these measurements of ingredients. You can go longer or shorter depending on your preference, but this amount of time gives a fork tender beef that holds its shape in the bowl or spoon. 40 minutes later, and we're just about ready to depressurize and eat. By now, the house is redolent with the scent of herbs and beef and wine and goodness. Your teenagers have emerged from their rooms and everyone is quite hungry. I love how this stew isn't too heavy. The herbs lighten it and the wine just matches the beef, and it's just a lovely soup to have even in summer or spring, fall or winter, it doesn't matter. The mushrooms are intact, they're not too leathery and rubbery. The beef is still keeping its shape, and it smells amazing to the point where Steven, my husband and producer, is really wanting his own bowl right now. But first we have to taste test it. This one turned out so well we ended up having to hide the leftovers in the vegetable bin behind the carrots. I hope you found this video useful. If you feel like it, hit like or subscribe. As always, the ingredient list and recipe is in the video description and posted at writersthatcook.com. Enjoy our next video, and as always, celebrate small victories.